I'm having the best life ever. However, I'm crying myself to sleep. I'm drinking way too much and I'm making reckless decisions with my personal life, my private life, and it's affecting my business and my business life. So panic attacks show up in my work environment. I worked with a very unhealthy person as well. And what I learned at the time is these lessons of betrayal and abandonment that I witnessed as a child are now showing up in my work life, right? So I've handled them in my personal, intimate life with my parents and my ex-husband, but now it's showing up with my boss. Life happens and it presents these lessons until we're done with the lesson. And I really believe we have to hone in and be like, enough is enough. I'm done with this so we can grow and expand.
All right, Jennifer, welcome to the Healthy CEO. I'm so glad to have you. How are you?
I'm super. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I tell you what, you're going to make me look cool. As a matter of fact, whenever your team reached out to me about you coming on, I said, oh, yeah, I've got to have her on because my youngest daughter, Abby, will think I'm really cool by interviewing a yoga expert because she's gone all in. She's really leaning into yoga. That is her thing right now. And she's definitely, both my girls are very into health and wellness. They have been because bless their hearts with a dad like me, they're kind of stuck. I never pushed it on them, but they were like, okay, that's just how we roll in this house. And Abby in particular, she's always been kind of a little mini me, and she's gotten really into yoga, and she's so excited about it. So whenever your folks reached out and you and I connected, I was like, oh, well, this is going to be great because there's so much I want to learn about yoga. It has been a love-hate relationship with me, I'll tell you. And so with that, I want to just kick it over to you. Tell me how your journey began. And because it's really cool with your background because it's not just yoga for fitness, but you tie so much. It's a very holistic approach to just living life well. Yoga is a component to that. So tell me how all of this came about. And let's just start there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to have this conversation, not just for you and your listeners, but for your daughters too. If I had known what I know now about yoga, I think I'd be much further along in this path of healing and awakening and confidence really in myself and my truth, but because that's what yoga did for me. So I'm going to back us up to about 2015. I'm in a corporate career, 20 plus years, and I was crushing it, or so I thought. I'm doing amazing things, climbing the corporate ladder, getting all of my validation and my worthiness from external resources, which is my W-2 and the leaderboard at work and the title, right? I am a little embarrassed to say that, but that's where I was and who I was at the time. Because how I was raised, I'm a daughter of two alcoholics. I also married a man who had some dysfunction in his own life that caused dysfunction in my life. And then we played that out in real time with each other. I'm now divorced. I left him in the end of 2011. So I really started to go down a path of destruction, we'll call it, self-abuse, really playing out the role of self-abandonment. And it manifested in my body in panic attacks, depression, and anxiety. I mentioned I'm crushing it at work. So what I look like on the outside and on Facebook, according to the truth of Facebook, is I am amazing. I'm having the best life ever. However, I'm crying myself to sleep. I'm drinking way too much and I'm making reckless decisions with my personal life, my private life, and it's affecting my business and my business life. So panic attacks show up in my work environment. I worked with a very unhealthy person as well. And what I learned at the time is these lessons of betrayal and abandonment that I witnessed as a child are now showing up in my work life, right? So I've handled them in my personal, intimate life with my parents and my ex-husband, but now it's showing up with my boss. Life happens and it presents these lessons until we're done with the lesson. And I really believe we have to hone in and be like, enough is enough. I'm done with this so we can grow and expand. So panic attacks is the body keeping the score. It's a dysregulated nervous system. It's high cortisol. It's a lot of fear. I'm living in a fear state. I was threatened with my job. I had made a pushback with my boss. A big disagreement, which was for the right reason, I believe, for my sales team. However, he disagreed and threatened my job. Fear, panic, overwhelm. I had just built a house for me and my two children and my mother to move in and help me raise my kids because they were 4 and 6 when we had separated. So I have littles that are codependent, obviously, and my mother's dependent on me. And when I hear that I could lose my job, rather than thinking, I have a great resume, I could get a job anywhere, literally, fear set in. And all I could think of is I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my house. I mean, talk about a stretch, but when you've been raised in this environment of hyper vigilance and not knowing if the rug was going to be pulled out because there was walking on eggshells and there was a lot of drama. This is just encoded in the body. And what I've learned now is it wasn't just my own life as a child, it was my mother's life, it was my grandmother's life. So this biological passing down through DNA of fear living and activated in real life in my body. So long story short, to get to how yoga comes in, I'm at least in therapy at the time. I'm sorting through some childhood trauma, some trauma with my ex-husband. And the therapist says, you need to go to yoga. Why would I go to yoga? Yoga schmoga. The last thing I needed to do was lay on a mat because, as a high performer, I'm beating the shit on myself on a daily basis. I'm a runner, I'm a kickboxer. And the last thing I'm going to do is go, and like chant and sleep, like, oh, so sweet. Put them in like a little blanket. But I go because I need to get rid of the panic attack so I can work. What's happening is it's affecting me, and I'm in my board meetings. I'm supposed to be presenting, and I couldn't. I had this like elephant in my chest. I'm like almost like hiccuping, like gasping for breath. And I remember one of my colleagues saying, "You okay?" And I'm like, "Don't put any more like attention on me. I need to breathe." I mean, embarrassing is the minimal experience of that. So I go to yoga. The beauty of this experience in divine intervention is it is not the restorative yoga or yin yoga. It's called power flow yoga. I have no idea what that even means. So a vinyasa flow. In the West, we've made it very rigorous. We've included like calisthenics, like planks and mountain climbers and burpees and all the things. So I go into the studio. It's tiny. The room is 98 degrees. I have no idea what I'm getting into, and I'm an athlete. So I'm going to crush this thing, whatever the yoga is. And we begin, and we're about halfway through the class, and the heat gets too much. I don't know if you've ever been in a heated flow or in like this happened to me in boxing. Your what is it? The heart rate is so high that you're burning the sugar, not the fat, right? So
Mhm,
it's starting to get the queasy feeling, right?
mhm.
And I'm in down dog and I look through my legs and behind me is the door. And I think I have to like hop over all these people. And am I going to take the mat? Am I just going to leave? Like, where's my car keys? I'm making a plan. I'm going to exit stage left. But the door was too far away and heat was too high. And I thought, I'm going to puke. And I don't want to puke. I'm like, because I'm an athlete, I'm too embarrassed to like let it all out. And all I could do in the moment while we're going through this rigorous flow and I'm sweating everywhere is just drop to my knees. And I dropped into the child's pose, and they had given us these little tiny white towels, and I didn't puke, but I cried, and I purged, and I was shaking and trembling, and I now know a somatic release, this beautiful experience of letting go and just allowing all of the things that have happened to me, all of the things that are part of this entire journey of expansion and growth that I was very much in a victim state, unbeknownst to me. I had no idea, but I was full of blame, full of shame, full of anger and resentment, all the ways that I continue to stack up and look at like how life has been so hurtful. Well, why me? And it all starts coming out. I waited till the end of that class because I couldn't dare, so much shame. I couldn't lift my face and look around. I just wanted the world to like fade away. And I'd been conditioned. What I would normally do is go drink it away or go eat it away or go gossip it away. And I couldn't go. So that little room, this container of like truth serum, like letting it start to just seep out, purge it out. And when the room was finally empty, I wiped my face, packed up my stuff, and I didn't quite know what happened to me until later that day. I reflected and thought that was different. No experience had brought me to that purging process in such a radical way that I couldn't wait to go back. Couldn't wait to go back. So that's how yoga met me on my mat. That's honestly how I found myself for the first time in my life as an adult woman who had completely violated the relationship with myself. I had self-betrayed. I had fallen from faith. I felt like I was completely neglected in a spiritual sense. Where was God in all of this? How did all these things happen? And why, when I prayed and fell to my knees, was there no answer? Even though, I mean, it's all how we look at it and how we perceive it and how available we are to that call back, to that reclamation. So I started back to yoga, this path of finding me, this reclamation. I am worthy and I'm not all the things that happened. I am so much more than that. It's just been a way that life has been the experience to get me to that mat, to surrender. beautiful, beautiful experience of faith and coming home.
Wow, that was a lot. And you know what's really cool? You know, the imagery that's so cool about it, Jennifer, is like for those of you who don't do yoga, the child's pose is it's one of my favorites just because
Yeah.
it is such a one because like kind of what you go to you know, "Oof, this is getting intense."
Yeah.
But kind of the imagery of surrender
Yeah.
in that moment for you especially, right? I mean, because you're trying to figure out how to get out of there, and all of a sudden you just kinda like you just take the child's pose, which for the folks that don't know, it'd be literally, you know, you describe better than me. I describe it, you go down, you know, you're on your knees, you lay your hands out forward, and you basically imagine kinda just bowing
Yeah.
almost. It's just like a it literally sounds like, "I surrender
Yeah.
to you," you know?
Yeah.
Um, it's kinda like Dwight Schrute on The Office whenever he's pleading mercy to Michael Scott. He's almost kinda getting down in a child's pose. It's
Wow.
that kinda that thing.
Oh,
But so, I mean, the imagery to that, and that's why I wanted to ask that story because I knew that yoga wasn't something that you went to the doctor and said, "Hey, you need to relax and you need to get healthier. So here's something you do." That is much more of a life story, and I think you definitely unpacked a lot there. And so now, and I gotta tell you too, now your experience was different than mine. My first experience with yoga ever was through P90X.
yeah.
And Tony Horton, I
Yeah.
like Tony, and I was a diehard P90Xer. I mean, I used to have guys over in my garage and lead them through P90X every 90 days. I mean, I was diehard. But man, you don't start people out doing yoga an hour and a half at a time. The
Yeah.
first and only class that's in the original P90X is 90 minutes. It
Yeah.
was like, and that just like was for me, I would just get angry because
Yeah.
I'm stiff. It's just and it is. And I'm an athlete too, always have been. Yoga will bring you to your knees literally and figuratively. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, for people that haven't done it, they think, "What are you talking about? Just holding these goofy poses." And no, 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 no. It is intense. So it was enough of I mean, a cathartic, you know, spiritual, all these experiences you had that but you were willing to come back.
Very.
And so, but then you take it to another level. You don't just realize for yourself that, hey, this is something that I'm going to find some healing, both emotionally and physically or whatever, but you start weaving it into your life in other ways. So when does it become like, you know what? Because it sounds like something I would do, except, you know, it's like usually the things that I'm really passionate about, I figure out how do I make this a part of my life at a much greater level? And
Yeah.
you've done that. So how does that happen? How does that begin?
Yeah. So that first class turned into a class every day. I had 3 studios that I had access to the same brand. And I would go to 1 class a day, sometimes 2 a day. I mean, I was borderline obsessed because I was chasing this feeling of it wasn't the high per se, it was the letting go, it was the purging, and so curious is what is it? I didn't know then. I didn't really have the language till I really started studying the physiology behind it and the spiritual. And I'm not saying from a religion spiritual, but the spirit of our energy moving and shifting and changing. So you're moving out the disorder, the dis-ease, mental, emotion, physical, spiritual, and you're making room for the reset, the recharge, the renewal, the restoration, the reclamation. And I have no idea that's happening. I just think the music's kind of fun. I like moving. I like dance. It's the power flow was amazing. The Tony Horton, I was a P90X diehard fan too. That's Ashtanga, so it's the foundation of what I teach. I did start taking the Ashtanga classes, and there it's almost like contortion. Like the lady would come over, and it's also slow. There's no music, so it's much more internal. You have to go inside. There's no external real guidance. It's just they cue the pose and you hold it 4 or 5 breaths, which feels like forever.
Exactly.
So a lot of mental mindset evaluation. What is this thought? Why am I so chattery? Why can't I just breathe? Okay, drop down into your body. It's a full embodiment. So both of those. Anyway, I'm going every day because I'm chasing this research. Can't say it was the high per se, but I knew I felt different. And I'm like, I want to know. I'm obsessed with knowing why do we suffer and what is the key to release the suffering? What is that path? I've learned now it's the path to surrender. But anyway, um, at the end of the summer, I walk into my home studio, and at the end of the hallway is a sign that says, with like heavenly lights shining down on it, and it's as if this is a path lit up, like in the airline, there's like the lit up hallway, like as if it's like just for me. Ah, and it says yoga teacher trade, and I'm like, what is this? I mean, could I be? Like, I'm so not sure of myself. I'm still learning who I am as a woman, as a survivor, really, um, and not the human doer. I'm just be now in this place of being and becoming and learning what it feels like to just be present to all that I am, not what I think I need to be worthy. So I see the sign and I quickly ask the teacher, what do I have to do? And he's like, well, you can just apply. And there's a fee. It's a pretty big investment by time. It's 200 hours. It was 15 weeks, Saturday, Sunday, and one night during the week. And I didn't care that whatever this was my answer. I knew at the time, after just a few months, the depression was gone, the anxiety was gone, no more panic attacks. And then I've shifted from unhealthy habits into these new healthy habits. So I now have a new obsession. Literally, I want to just feel good and learn about what changed in me and could I help other people? I mean, I've been a helper, a coach, a guide my whole life. That persona of divine feminine, nurturer, caregiver. But I got a little entangled with the performer and the doer and overachiever based on not feeling worthy enough. But I couldn't wait to help give back and help people. If my thought was, I couldn't bear to think of anyone ever feeling as bad or as low as I had. I mean, my lows had been so dark and so desperate, and my cry for help and of wanting something or somebody to come save me. Because in every sad pop song and every sad movie, all the Disney movies, somebody comes. You're never stuck in that place for long enough alone. And I had to sit in that despair and this process of reclaiming my worthiness and finding myself and just deciding I can do something different. The suffering was the choice. I didn't have to make poor decisions in romantic relationships. I didn't have to drink as much as I was. I didn't have to be so resentful and so angry. I could change. And so that path of change was what I was witnessing on myself. And I wanted to gift that. And still today, when I think back, it's been so long since I've been in such a desperate place, but it was tragic. And it broke me to think if anyone else was ever suffering, that they could have a means to just take a few moments and breathe. They could make their way to a yoga mat, that they could get through it and they didn't have to suffer another moment, another day. So that yoga teacher training sign, besides the yoga class changing my life, that yoga teacher sign set me on this path since 2015 I left corporate 2 years ago. I don't even work for corporate America. I have had to find and navigate this rebirthing, yes, but also reclaiming who am I here for and realigning to what are my God given talents and what am I on this planet for? And it keeps evolving and it keeps growing and keeps getting better. But that yoga teacher training is what I evolved into and inserted myself into. And that was amazing because I did become a teacher. And within, I think I graduated November 25th. And by December 12th, I had my first job. And I was at 2 studios and I started teaching right away. And that was just the next level of holy shit. When you show up as a servant to serve, to give, to guide, the fulfillment is beyond what I was ever getting out of my corporate job, out of any commission check, out of any client win. Like this was different, life changing, because I made a decision to put everything I had carried from the pain story into a path of this awakening and evolution to serve, to give.
I love it. All right, so there's something I wanna double click on that you said. You said path to surrender.
Yeah.
So if the listener out there, they heard that and they realize there's some walls they've built, there's some chains that they've allowed to be holding them back. I'm reminded of the story of I used to tell this, I actually include this in one of my books, that, back in the day when they would train elephants, they would tie them to a stake as a baby, right? And,
Yeah.
and there were these tiny little elephants that couldn't move their foot. But then all of
Yes.
a sudden, when they become these, huge beasts, they still use the same stake, same rope, but the elephant thinks that they can't pull themselves from it. So we get tied in these like mindsets that we're locked in, we're chained, we're tethered. So explain to this audience kind of that path to surrender in both your own personal context, but also just in a general sense, how do you start to do that? Because a lot of people, they hear surrender and they hear weak. They don't
Yeah.
understand that there's a power in it. So kind of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So I didn't know then, but as I can reflect now, I know where the shift changed and how I was able to come to a place of this deep healing is only through the surrender. So the idea that we are weak, because I think when life has presented these circumstances or experiences that have been so painful and so tragic and so hard and heartbreaking, that we have had to survive. And in order of that survival has been to build up the facade or the blocks or the barriers because we don't want to be hurt. One, it's part of the brain, right? It's survival. So the reptilian brain, so we actually don't die. And public speaking can feel like that death sentence, or you get the bill in the mail and it's more than you have in the bank account. There's so many ways that when we're triggered that it feels like a death. So we go into a survival mode. We move into that fight or flight or freeze. But if we can override that and then also understand that there's a spiritual path of a promise that there's more for us, that we don't have to live in that path of suffering. So it's a test, which then becomes the testimony. What I know for sure is when I was guarded and self-preserving, I couldn't access the love that is my birthright, that is inherently mine. And because the love I was looking for on the validation was external. It was from a man, it was from friendships, it was from work. What I now know is that's synthetic. I mean, I'm not saying love can't be beautiful and special and sacred, but mine wasn't. It had terms and conditions. It was, you do this and I will do that for you. And it was from a place of deep uncertainty and not feeling safe enough. I mean, I'm like Oliver Twist holding my hands out, like, please feed me and I will only give back if I trust you enough. And I had violations as a child. When we're violated and we are stripped of our power, we become powerless. And at one point, if we look back in time, you can recognize that it wasn't just the person that violated you. And I don't mean it has to be deep trauma. It could have been a teacher that gave you a grade that you were unhappy about, or a coach could have criticized you publicly. Or it could be some deep, incredible trauma. Trauma is trauma. How we receive it and how it impacts us and how it imprints on us and how we define it going forward is where that trauma bond becomes. And so if we're then conditioned to only self-preserve and protect, it's not that path of surrender. We're fearful that if we open up and we become vulnerable to that path of surrender, that something's not going to be there to catch us. But it works two ways. There's two parts of this relationship, right? That we can't have fear and faith in the same line. You can't have love. You can have love and hate. I mean, we can play there a little bit, but this idea of faith that something is going to catch you. And part of it is spiritual, yes, but part of it is you. You rescue you, you catch you, you abandoned you, you betrayed you. I know this by my own testimony, by my own evidence. If I look back, that life was hard, life happened, and other people were hurting me. Maybe it was parents, maybe it was caregivers. And then at one point, I stopped defending it. Maybe I was too small to. I'm not saying that we need to be responsible for things that happened in our childhood when we were little, right? Little tinies, but some point, maybe it was middle school or high school, you stopped fighting for your own self-worth and you said, F it, let that thing happen. Self-betrayal. This is why I say I found myself on that yoga mat for the first time in my adult life because I didn't know the betrayal was also self-induced. So I'm going to share with you the most powerful story of surrender that I have. I was on a retreat in Mount Shasta, Northern California, just about 2 years ago. And one of the experiences, we were able to do a guided meditation. Um, and I'm raised Christian. I have studied so many parts of different religions over 25 years. And I'd say it's because when I was a little girl, promised by scripture that Jesus would always protect us, the shepherd and the child. Um, I would invite, as a little one, Jesus to sleep in my bed because where we lived wasn't always safe. There was a lot of fear. There was, my a brick got thrown through our window. Our tires got slashed. Or my mom's windshield got smashed. It wasn't safe. So I would just pray that we wouldn't die that night and that Jesus would come protect us. Um, and that's when I'm maybe 5 or 6. But later in life, when things continued to happen, I would blame, you're not here, you're not protecting me. Why did these things happen? Thinking that it was only, not considering my own free will, what part I was playing in all of it. So I bring us back to this meditation, and I'm moving in the meditation, which normally you're still, but I don't stop myself from moving. I'm kind of moving and I end up like forward folding. So I'm in the crisscross legs and forward folding. And I'm like, this is so weird. Like there's people in the space, but the room was pitch black. And I keep thinking, like, what are they going to think? I'm like moving in meditation, forward folding. And in that moment, I'm on dirt. I'm not literally, but energetically, spiritually. And I look up and I see Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene. And in the moment, I'm like, so weird. Like, what are they here for? And they say, look up. And I look up and I'm at the base of the cross. And Jesus is hanging on the cross. I've never had an experience like this in my life. And Jesus says to me, the suffering ended with me. Why do you choose to continue your suffering?
Wow.
And like the biggest weight on my chest, but also at the same time, the biggest release of, holy shit, why am I carrying not just all of my pain, but I would get entangled with some of my students' pain stories from yoga, my children's pain stories, my ex-husband's pain stories, my father's pain stories. Like all the time I witnessed pain and thought as this vessel and container, it was part of me and I should carry that too. Like it was so heroic and so responsible. And yet it's not. That it's not my pain. And even my own personal pain, why am I still continuing to hold it so closely as part of my own identity? Like, look at what I've been through. I mean, I would tell you the stories of the trauma of my childhood and be like, well, look what happened to me. What happened to you? And I get caught up in like, let's talk about the pain and the trauma. And like, but why? Why? If we would just have enough faith to surrender to a power that has spun up universes and planets and humans and animals and trees and skies and oh my goodness, the stars and everything. But yet we think, oh no, 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 it's so important that we have this story of pain instead of letting go and releasing the suffering. Like so, in the moment, I'm like, have it, have it. I don't need it, and the shifting and changing of that identification of the pain, it doesn't have to be mine. So it's the most spiritual elation, evolution, and ascension of is whatever the faith is that anyone listening has, there is a force of good. There is a love that is so fierce and tantalizing. You can feel it when you shift. You got to let go of the suffering, though. You can't feel it when you're in that suffering. But when you start to loosen up that grip, that entanglement, this entrapment, the little rope you talk about with these elephants, just a little bit, let's soften just enough is this path of like, if I let go, could you fill me with the love that I am promised? Could you fill me with the space and the peace, the calm, the surrender of, I can't do it anymore. I couldn't hold it all together. What happened after that meditation is the next morning we were on top of the mountain in Mount Shasta. They normally don't get a lot of snow, and they had 25 inches of snow just before we flew in. So we snowshoed, and what we were told is there's this waterfall, and they said you can't go down there. It's blocked by the snow. It's too dangerous. So we sat at that place in a meditation, and I kept hearing, "Come to the water and wash your face." And I was like, "Who's saying that?" Like the guide wasn't saying it. No one's talking. I'm like, it's so weird. It's a couple years ago. I've gotten much clearer on the voice, on my guidance, on spirit, divine, talking to me, being connected with me, speaking through me. And I heard it again, "Come wash your face." I was like, what is it? What is the call? And kept looking down, like, is there something there? Is there somebody there? And I told the guide, I'm like, I have to go down to the waterfall. And he said, you can't, there's no path. And like, like a movie, these people come walking up this path, like from the waterfall. And they had come around the other way. I don't think it was like, mystical so much as they had just gone the other way and were fighting their way up with their snowshoes. So he said, I guess you can go. And I'm like trembling, walking down this energetic pull, and the water is absolutely freezing. And I rolled up my sleeves, took off my hat, and I have a picture of this on my Instagram, just because it's so powerful and I want to share if anyone wants to see. put my hands in the water as I'm shaking and I just start to wash my face, and it reminds me of the suffering ends with me, clear it out, let it go. And in this moment feels like this bathing, this christening, this baptism of this just releasing and letting go. And so this was March, and just a few weeks later, I came home and got baptized at my church because I thought I have to continue with this call, this quest, this calling and request, the summoned into the water. Um, so my journey goes from the suffering, which is where I lived for a really, really, really long time, and danced in this really dark place. You know, you'd mentioned on another podcast about the dragons and the shadow, and they
Mhm.
were everywhere. And not so much anymore. Not so
Wow.
much. Yeah.
Well, and there's okay, I'm gonna try to respond to that as though this happens quite a bit. I'll be talking to somebody on the podcast and I'll get some message and somebody will say, yeah, but I heard what Jennifer said about this. But, and like I could see somebody in this case go, but you don't know my pain. You
Yeah.
don't know what I've been through. And so, based on what you've told me and based on my own personal experiences, you're not saying to pretend like the pain never happened. You're
Not
not
at all.
saying, you're just saying you don't have to let the pain continue into your present life
Yeah.
and determine how you will go forward.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's been so helpful to me. So, my my marriage to the girl's mom was one of just it was a lot of pain, and due to honoring them, my girls, I never dishonored their mom, and I always tell people it's kind of funny. I say, um, Carrie was not a great wife, but she's a great ex-wife. We get along well, so and so a lot of people don't understand how I walk through, and now I said I would never marry again, but I've been married now to my wife, Jimlyn, for going on 6 years, and it has been like the greatest blessing of my life. And I love her with just reckless abandon. No
Mm-mm.
holding on to that past pain of, of just the things that went on in that previous experience. And people wonder how, and it's not like I don't pretend that it didn't happen. It's that I can't let it's a completely self-defeating approach to say, "Oh, I'm gonna remember what happened, and then it could happen again, so therefore I'm never going to be hurt again, and so the only way I'm gonna be hurt is to be reminded. I'm
Mm.
gonna constantly remind myself of this pain." That's what I hear you saying, and then as I tie this to yoga, um, I would say yoga's painful at times, but what I also hear a lot and I'm no yoga expert, it's one of the reasons why I really want to get you on, is you have to settle into the discomfort. You can't it's not pretending, it's not put it out of your mind, mind over matter. That is not what it is. It's no, this is not comfortable. A crane position is not comfortable. It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be an acceptance of it, an acknowledgement of it, and knowing that if you're willing, you'll eventually get into that wonderful my favorite yoga pose of all, which is Shavasana of the corpse, where I'm just laying there like I'm dead when it's over, because that means it's over, and I just have this
Done.
nice release. And I think that's what a lot of people they want it they think that by clinging to and remembering the pain, that somehow it's never gonna happen again. Or those of us who have moved forward, that somehow we're pretending like it didn't happen. It's all a mental thing, and that's not it, and I don't hear you
Mm.
saying that, and that's what I would tell that person that might say that is like, "Jennifer never said, 'Don't pretend it didn't happen.' Don't you d you know, she didn't say don't acknowledge it." What she's saying is, acknowledge it happened, acknowledge it's in the past, and move forward with a new life that is not impacted in an adverse way
Yeah.
from that pain. Have I got that right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think in the pain, still living actively in the pain, if, especially my Lord, if it's still happening, like find help and get help. I my story is there's a lot of pain in the past. My clients that I coach, the pain, I mean, the unthinkable, the unconscionable that has happened to some of my clients, it shakes me to my core. But there is a place of courage in the will to move past it to create a new experience. I mean, it's definitely a deep, 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 deep desire to end the suffering. And it's a conscious choice because after I started my deep healing and yoga and more spiritual awareness and awakening and building that new relationship with my creator, I then drank too much. I still soothed myself and my pain and shame with alcohol. I'm 2 years sober in January, because I still couldn't let go of some of the pain. I mean, it's a step-by-step process. It's now 2024. My separation was in 2011. I mean, there's no quick pill, there is no magic button. And so when we talk about letting go of the past story and the pain, it's not so much not addressing what happened, it's acknowledging it, having a devotion of it, like writing it into a journal and saying, yes, this happened, and witnessing, being the witness of the trauma of the experiences and getting right with yourself. A part of, I'm not talking about childhood stuff, but as adults, we actively participate in these pulls and pushes, these polarities with our partners, with our lovers, with our children, with our parents. You know, there's this recognizing what part you've played, and getting really right, being radically truthful with yourself. So you're not in that pattern, you know, this victim state. And I hated that word when I heard it, but when we are not declaring our worthiness that we are worthy of a life full of love and abundance, we are in the state of the suffering and it's still a victim state because we are looking at the evidence of why it's hurtful, why it's so hard, why things have happened. So it's just a new awareness. It's like lifting up your eyelids and looking at a new sunrise. You have a new choice every day. And the pain, I want to just honor whoever is in pain and has had the things happen. It sucks. And I still don't understand why, other than when you get to the other side, just like when you get to the other side of that yoga challenge, not just the standing poses, but the yin poses in a pigeon for 8 minutes when your
Mhm.
piriformis is inflamed and like throbbing, and the teacher's like, 5 more breaths, and you're like, my leg's going to explode.
Right.
But once you hear there's one last breath and your body goes, and then there's this release and the softness, or in a frog pose, my lord, that is like one of my biggest teachers. I hate
Same,
it, but
same.
once I'm in it long enough, I can actually reprogram the neurons to say, I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. Nothing is happening to me. I'm going to breathe into the space in my body to allow my body to soften and to let go and to release. And then the body absolutely receives that instruction. We are the commander. We are the conductor of these facilities, this faculty of the body. We have to be in charge of how we're feeling. So yeah, the yoga teaches not just the breathing into the discomfort, but the empowerment of being present to it. Right? So you can pull out of a yoga pose if it's painful and you want to pull out. Try it. Go back and then come back to it and see if you can come back into it. What it teaches you is the discipline of what's happening on that mat and outside of the room. When people are, I mean, we know the polarity of the political world right now. I mean, there is so much of an agenda of separation and hate on purpose. So we can either be indoctrinated into that, or we can walk into a path of, I'm going to choose love and connection and find the way that we are more alike than we are more separate. So if we can practice on a yoga mat in the privacy of our four corners, to expand and breathe, and to be stretched and breathe, and to be uncomfortable and breathe, and not pull out. And if you need to go to child's pose, go to child's pose, but maybe pop back up and go right back in. You can practice it on your mat. You can behave in that way on outside of the mat, outside of the yoga studio, where it's a path of literally the surrender. You're surrendering to the discomfort. You're surrendering to the chatter. You're surrendering to the desire to be perfect. There's no perfect yoga pose. I tease my ladies. I'm like, I don't have an award today. There is no medal. There's no perfect yoga right now. Like, let's just be present and see what we can learn, how we can expand, and how we can grow. And most importantly, how we can accept who we are, where we're at, exactly how we are, because we're good enough exactly how we are.
You know, that's one of the things I think, and hearing you talk is, I'm sure you can relate to this. That's one of the things about yoga is that it's a great equalizer because, you know, people like you and I who are performers, who are, you know, those overachievers, and we like to be good at everything we do. yoga, you don't just roll up and all of a sudden just crush a royal dancer pose or whatever the cat, you fill in the blank. No, it takes time. Another thing you said too that I think is so important for people to realize. Here's what I wrote in my notes. Overcoming pain in one area makes you more able to overcome pain in another. And I'm reminded of Michael Gervais, the incredible sports psychologist, that he once said something to me, or not to me, but on his show that has resonated with me is that we're taught positive self-talk, which is great. And that's one of his main things. However, he said a lot of people self-talk themselves a bunch of BS. Like you're about to take on some great challenge. You tell yourself you can do it and all this. But if you don't have any confirmation from the past that you're able to overcome, then you're just telling yourself a bunch of crap. By doing something hard like yoga or anything, that's just kind of the topic of the day. But by putting yourself through these challenges, then you're able to, when those, like imagine, yeah, you've just been holding that frog pose where you say, no, now sink into it, sink into it. And you're just dying. And it's like you're in it for however long. And you're thinking, I cannot go another second. If you've got those, now here's where I think the bad circumstances that you've overcome come into play. If you look back over the course of your life and you can say, hey, I made it through that. So I know I can make it through this.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in a hot yoga studio. This is painful, but I know I have the artifacts of past pain that I have overcome. Now I'm here. I can overcome this. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about any sort of physical training, be it yoga, be it CrossFit, whatever people choose, P90X. When you submit yourself and you surrender to a certain sort of self-inflicted discomfort, let's not even call it pain, but discomfort.
Yeah.
Then what that does, it's not just about numbing you to future pain. It's giving you artifacts to draw from when you find those other challenges to be able to be truthful with yourself to say, I can overcome this because I overcame that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I love about your story, because I also wrote here, and I don't want this to become a controversial topic against medication or anything like that. But what I see you doing is, instead of going right to the quick cure, fill in the blank, whatever that might be. For you, it was for a while alcohol. I think that's universal. But a lot of people will be, go fill my prescription, go whatever. But instead, you chose to start to work and kind of be more proactive and heal from the inside out. And I think that's a great message for people to hear, that they do have agency to not, and again, folks out there, they hear me say this all the time on this show. There is a place for pharmaceuticals. There is a place. I'm not getting all Tom Cruise on everybody here with Matt Lauer circa 19 or 90, whatever that was. I'm just saying, what you're showing, though, is we have agency to find healing from a lot of past trauma and pain within ourselves, should we choose to embrace it. And it might be embracing a new kind of discomfort,
Yeah.
but it will also help heal us from the past. Do I have that right? I know I said a lot there.
Yeah, I have a student who's a professor in women's rights, human rights.
Mhm.
She's heard of some of the worst of human trafficking and violations of some of her students globally. And one of her students came up with the feedback to her that he didn't understand coming into her class, understanding what was happening to women. At the end of the semester, he told her, "I get it. I understand now. Pain is pain.
Mhm.
We don't have to define it or justify it. Pain is pain. And when we have been so in pain and in suffering, and we have found a way to numb it or to deal with it or to just get through life. I mean, sometimes if there is a medication that's worked with you and you're under a doctor's guidelines, whether it's pharmaceutical or if it's psychedelics, but you've talked about that on your podcast, a way to navigate how to live and actually get out of bed. But then there's also the next level of, are we just masking the growth and the healing? So managing pain is one part. The next part, the next level of your own evolution and your awakening, your ascension really is how to heal the pain. You're not going to get to a healing when it's not available to you. So whether it's just completely ignoring it, whether you're using a substance or not, And David Hawkins talks about this in his book, Letting Go, that we repress emotions, we suppress emotions, or we express. So there's three. Most of us don't express them. We're not walking around saying, hey, you actually really hurt my feelings this afternoon. I'd like to unpack this with you. Do you have a couple minutes? Wouldn't
Right.
that be ideal? I do work with my children like that. I have a 19 and a 17-year-old, and we talk like that on a daily basis, but we're a little bit more advanced because I know what the cost is of not addressing them.
Right.
In yoga and Ayurveda, we understand that the number one cause of disease is inflammation. The number one cause of inflammation is ama. It's a Sanskrit word, which means undigested emotions and undigested food. We eat too much. We eat too much because we use it as a form of numbing and self-soothing. We also make choices with that type of food, usually really processed or very sugary, to give us that endorphin high or that comfort in the belly. If we're eating comfort food, the blood rushes to our tummy, which makes us feel safe. So we're playing with these synthetic things, which is going to avoid the ability to access the real root of the emotions, of the impact, the imprint on us. So if we can get really clear on enough is enough, I want to grow and heal so I can show up. Your story of your second marriage sounds really beautiful. Like, couldn't we all deserve to have a chance at love that feels like that, where we're cared for, where it seems and feels unconditional, supportive, and kind? But we can't get to those type of advanced relationships, honest relationships, when we're still numbing or hiding or just not addressing. So rather than, explosively expressing our feelings, and rather than just suppressing or repressing, the repress is we don't recognize it's even happened until sometimes on like a psychedelic journey or a hypnotherapy, maybe it comes back to you. But this suppressed reality of, I'll get to it later, I don't have time for that, we keep shoving it back, we keep shoving it down, it shows up in the body. So you're on a path of missing the joy of an evolved, awakening relationship with the people you care for and you love, or your impact on humanity. But you're also on a path of disorder and potentially disease. So there's actually a greater cost than just, I want to heal the trauma and feel better in my life. Yeah, yes, check, let's do that so that we can all be in better relationships with ourselves, with each other. But also let's course correct this path of biohacking, the damage that we've done that we might be unconscious to, where you're not then going to the doctor and getting the diagnosis. And then you're like, oh shit. And this is the next, how did this happen? Really? You've had the trauma, you've not dealt with it, you've pretended it's not there, although showing up in life, having 2-year-old tantrums, pushing people away, being rude, being obnoxious, not just you, I've done it too. Um, and now let's just come to terms where we're not waiting for that sentence of disorder and disease in the body, mentally, emotional, physical, and spiritual, where we're completely disconnected. We're devoid of this worthiness of self and this self-empowerment, the sovereignty. You mentioned this, like that you have authority. You just gave it away for so long. And now it's this reclamation. So my teaching is to reclaim the self-worth, to stand in your truth and become unshakable in who you are and what you're worthy of having and receiving. The pain and the trauma of the past ends up being the thief of all the joy. We
Mm.
can stay there, but there you forego the joy.
One of my favorite things that you said there that I think a lot of people, and I don't think they overlook it because it's willful denial. I think it's just ignorance. I mean, they just don't know, is the damage to the physical body that anxiety, holding on to guilt, shame, anger, bitterness. I mean, the old saying, hating another person and holding bitterness is like drinking poison,
Yeah.
hoping the other person will die.
Yeah.
They don't correlate these negative adverse feelings for others, for life, for your situation. They don't correlate that with, like you say, inflammation. I mean, what are you talking about? Because I'm angry and because I'm full of anxiety, that's causing my body to be inflamed. Yet, we know that, and I've had people on this podcast, from physicians to other experts, that have said, yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of heart disease, heart attacks. That's why heart attacks happen to people that go and run every single day. It's because they're full of anxiety, stress, worry. It will wreak havoc on the body if you don't get it in check. And I used to be a much more high strung guy. Now, a lot of this just comes with age. I'm just older, so I'm more mellow, and I don't let things get to me the way they once did, just because I'm able to better contextualize the stress of life. I'm able to realize that what I can cook up the worst case scenarios in my mind, and they almost will never come to pass. But also, there's this part of me that when I find myself about to get really wound up or anxious, then I say, "Wait a minute, dude, you gotta chill because this is the bad stuff. This is worse than you going and slamming 3 cheeseburgers at once and chasing it with a bottle of whiskey. You're doing damage to yourself. Your mental state and how you're processing your emotions, it can have such an adverse impact." And, like, the closest thing I have to a hobby is taking care of myself and being healthy. I don't I always tell people, I don't golf, I don't fish, I don't watch sports ball, I don't do any of that. What I do is I just try to stay healthy. I do this podcast. And so therefore, but I want to make sure that every piece of me is staying, in line, in order. And I don't and being healthy and well does not include being a hothead, getting angry, being over anxious. And that's tough for me because a lot of times, I mean, people make me mad. People make me angry, especially like if I have to call a service provider, like a cell phone company or something like that. Whew, I have to really get myself in a good space before I call to deal with something like that. As silly as that sounds, those are the things that trigger me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you're right. I'm glad you mentioned that because it is one of those things that people just don't take for granted. Your heart health is so correlated to your emotional health.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think a lot of people overlook.
Yeah. So, from a Chinese medicine perspective, the organs reflect the emotions that are stored
Mm,
and trapped. So, an example I have is I was coaching a client who came to me and didn't want to go down the traditional path of treating cancer. From a
mm,
monetary perspective, it was out of pocket. It was thousands and thousands of dollars that weren't going to be covered by his insurance. So it wasn't just that he was being, I don't want to go down that path. It's that he couldn't afford it. So he asked from an Ayurvedic perspective, are there steps I could offer him to help him be as healthy as he could? Then I said, sure. I'm not a doctor. We do practice. I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner, but not an MD. And so we cleared that up first. I'm just offering that to anyone listening, like I'm not a doctor, so go down what path you believe is best for your own health care. But what had happened is his cancer was in his kidneys and in his lungs. And what we know from Chinese medicine is that the lungs hold grief and sadness, and the kidneys holds anger and rage. And this man was in his 70s and the cutest, like sweetest, most charming gentleman. And so I met him and I was a little bit like, I don't get it. So I asked, is there any possibility that you may hold grief and sadness in your body? And he said, oh yeah, there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of sadness. And I said, how about, I'm literally thinking I'm shooting in the dark here, but I'm going based on science, right? I'm an energetic science here. How about anger and rage? And he's like, yeah, plenty of that. Shocked because how he presents is so sweet and available, emotionally available. I coached him for a few months. We course corrected. He processed, I guided the anger and rage, the guilt and the sadness. We found where the root was, something in childhood that then continued to repeat itself throughout all of his life. He went on this path of reclaiming his self-worth. And he had done some workshops before, but didn't really get enough of the core. Because even though you hear this thing like self-love and self-care, like, but what is that until you find this path of surrender and you decide enough is enough. I don't want to live this way anymore. I'm ready to do things right by me. And he did. And 6 months later, and he's cancer free. And
wow.
he shares his updates with me. And I said, tell me everything. How are you feeling? What are you doing? And he said, it was really understanding that I can control my outcome. I can change my body. I can actually be a healer of myself because he knows he's worthy of it. And I'll just share that his doctor, when he rejected the treatment, had told him that the doctor was gonna call hospice and have hospice show up at his house to help him pass. That's what the doctor told him.
Wow.
I mean, could you imagine already being in enough
No.
rage, enough grief, enough sadness, and then the person that you're asking for guidance says, if you don't do this treatment plan, this is what's going to happen. And it took the courage and the willpower for him to say, I'm going to find another way. And he did it. And he's amazing. And he's happy, even more, even better than the cancer eradicating is he is joyful and he is just so bright and so light and so free of the pain. It's like, I think about it like we're dragging these like dead bodies behind us of all the ways we're keeping
Yeah.
the score of who did us wrong.
Yeah.
You owe me. We want this retribution. You hurt me. And it's living inside of us. And to your point, the organs have to hold that pain until we
Yeah.
decide moving, walking in nature is a great way to start releasing, doing breath work, meditation, journaling. Obviously, I love yoga for somatic release, but dancing, yelling, chanting,
Mm.
incantations, prayer, there's so many different paths you can use of so many scriptural, just gurus that have the wisdom of why are we choosing to suffer,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
when do we want to let it go? And that's the day that
Yeah.
we really wake up and we start to reclaim, like, oh yeah, I can have joy, I can have love, I don't have to have so much pain.
Have you found too that this is one of the things that over the last few years I've done is I just refuse now to keep company with people that bring me down, bring me anxiety, bring you that are still wallowing in self-pity or something. And or that, have some perception of me from decades ago and they continue to project
Mm,
their own insecurities onto me. So I don't wanna say I completely cut them out of my life, but I just choose to not spend time with them, and for a while, that was hard because some of them are nice people. I have some people that are nice, kind people that I just refuse. Um, I'm very deliberate on who I spend my time with these days,
yeah,
and a lot of it has to do with this. It's not being haughty, it's not being I don't want it to ever be that way, and if somebody's in need, if it's one of these people that get on my nerves or that calls me and they say, "Jason, I need you here," I'm there. I'm not gonna say, "Nope," because you will disturb my peace and
right.
you're bad for me. You're gonna cause inflammation. No, I'm not. I'm not that bad. But if given the choice, there are certain people that I finally just had to say, "You know what?" And I've got relatives that are like this that I had to say, "You know what? I love them, I pray for them, but I don't have to go spend time with them."
Yeah.
It's unhealthy their projection is not good for them.
Mhm.
Their perception of me and their projection of me is not good for them. I don't well up joy and good feelings in them, and they certainly don't bring it out in me.
Yeah.
So the best I can do is love them from afar, and when we do have our moments, make the best of it, but then just kinda keep a healthy distance. Have you found that is that am I right on that? I
Yeah.
mean, and you may not have an answer. I'm just help me, Jennifer. Is that a
Yeah.
good thing, or am I being a complete dick by not hanging out with
No.
people sometimes?
No, your time is the commodity that is not replaceable, so we want to
Yeah.
be mindful of how we spend our time. And as we're working on this path of being present and really
Mm,
open and available, you want to be mindful of who you're with and who you're surrounding yourself with. So, from an emotional standpoint, mental standpoint, and also energetically, right? Not just with people, family, but like all of our surroundings of where I'm going out in public and where I'm spending my time and how I'm emotionally, energetically available. I will say with the caveat of friends and family and people that are in our life, every person is there to be a part of your expansion. And we get to choose if we're going to allow it to expand us for the greater good or to be more harmful. Uh, so there's this philosophy that the parts of our lives when we're triggered is showing us where we're not healed.
mm,
So when we can be present and mindful with this devotion to the healing and the ascension journey, but when we do get triggered in the moment, we're heated and we're spastic and reactive. But as quickly as you can come back to, oh wow, I was just triggered. What is this really about? Is my mantra because it's never, ever, ever about the person that cut you off or the bill or the Verizon person, right? It's about some part of you that's unhealed and like a active live wire. You've been gifted the ability to go sit in stillness and unpack it, journal through it. And depending on where you're at in the world, I was just traveling an airplane. Airports are really great places for us to be
mm.
triggered and irritated and just breathe into it and notice, what is this really about? This isn't about them. This is about me. Where am I unhealed? Where can I grow? Um, and I think the family members, they're really, especially intimate relationships. You know, your ex, my ex. My ex was the big villain in my life, and my dad for the longest time. And I had lots of stories to share about it. And now I'm like, wow, one of my greatest teachers. And it's an advanced posture to step into, to reflect back. Like, I would not be the woman I am today if those things didn't happen to me. And
Yeah.
I can now say, as a healed vessel, my heart is healed. I am no longer in the victimhood of blaming and shaming, but owning I needed to go through that to really wake up, to be brought to my knees. I mean, to my knees, head down, crying my guts out, not just in the yoga room, but many times, to be reminded I have a choice. So the reflection, the projection, everybody's literally a mirror, just to show back to us what part we need to heal from the judgment, from the blame, from the shame, and that reactivity of, what is this really about? So you don't have to spend the time, but sometimes I get a little curious, like, who is going to set me off today? And it's not very
Hmm.
often, but yeah, sometimes my clients will say hurtful things, or want a refund, or didn't like something. And I used to, as a recovering codependent, be so hurt by them. And I'm like, I have a choice in how I receive this information. Can I learn and grow from it? Can I be a better server to my community? Or can I take this as blame and shame and go beat myself up about it? So we still have a choice in that experience and that exchange.
Yeah, there's two things you made me think of there. One, Adam Lane Smith was on my podcast years ago, and he writes a lot about attachment and everything. He's a great guy. You'd love his work. And I told him that one of the things that I always used to do in almost every circumstance. I don't know if our backgrounds are somewhat similar. It sounds like in different ways, may look different, but I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. As a result of me growing up with the fear that people would cut me off, would shut me out, the people that were closest to me, the people that were tasked with loving me and always accepting me, would be some of the ones that would just completely disregard me. So
Mhm.
therefore, whenever I met anyone, like there was a time whenever I would sit down, like if this were 10 years ago and we set up for this podcast, my main goal wouldn't be to get a good interview out of you. It would be to make you like me. I would
Mm.
have to make sure I'd have to put myself beneath you and make sure that you liked me, because I had experienced so much rejection
Mm.
in my life from people that were so close to me, that I needed to make sure that I blended in. I was a chameleon and everybody liked me, because my first assumption was they'll probably hate me.
Mm.
Because again, the people that were supposed to love me the most in my life basically treat me, and some of them to this day, as though they hate me. And so it took me, and then Adam Lane Smith, I explained that to him, and he said, yeah, he said, the reason why you do that when you go into interactions, automatically making the other person feel better than you, comfortable, you're so you're so willing to put them above you, is because you're starting from a place of lesser than. You
Yeah.
think that you're lesser as a result of that. And I had to overcome that. And now I realize that no, I don't need you to like me. I want you to like me. It'd be great. I'm going to be nice to you and kind to you, but my life does not change based on your opinion of me. And so now I'm going to be me, you be you, and let's hang out, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. And that has been a game changer for me. But so many of us who have gone through that pain, that rejection, especially from those people that love us, then we start to be and if you're wired like you and I as performers, as
Yeah.
we're good at what we do, we crush it at work, we crush it in our health, so you just become this like thing that you're just trying to constantly maintain an acceptable, likable image of what you think people think you are and what you think people want you to be, that you lose yourself in the
Yeah.
process. And that was something that was really difficult. It took a long time for me to overcome. And it's just, and it's so healing. And again, I get frustrated when with these people that say, I don't give a damn what anybody thinks of me. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do.
If you didn't, you wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
That's a surefire when somebody, because I've got a relative that just prides himself on, well, I don't care what anybody thinks, or I'm going to wear what I want, or blah, blah. No, you care more than almost anyone I know.
Yeah.
That's why you constantly talk about it.
Yeah.
But that's something that I think a lot of people, just being ourselves, and I talked about our ages before we came on. It's like there's some point in your life, I think just age gets you to the point where you just finally go, this is who I am. And the best part is saying, this is who I am, and I accept it.
Mm.
And I'm going to build upon that.
Yeah.
I'm going to work on that.
Yeah.
I'm going to accept some of the faults, and the ones that are really important, I'm going to try to make better.
Yeah.
I'm going to really work on the ones that are good to make them even shine more.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I'm just going to be comfortable with who I am. And I'm not going to pretend I'm anything I'm not. And that to me is like the ultimate. I
Yeah.
think that's just one of the biggest peace givers that I've had in the last few years. Just here I am. I'm not going to pretend like. That's why I hate whenever I go up to other dudes and they're always like, so what do you do for a living? What do you do?
Yeah.
I'm like, I finally told one dude, bless his heart, and it sounded so rude. I was like, I'll be honest with you, talking about what I do for a living is like telling you how I like to watch paint dry. I just don't, I don't play that game anymore, especially with dudes, because a lot of dudes, they're just like, they do it because they really, what they really want to say is, hey, I need to know something. Are you more successful than I am? I just got to get that out of the way right now.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, I'm going to tell you how awesome I am.
Yeah.
And if you are, then I'm going to find out how I can leverage you to make myself more successful. Now, a lot of that's my projection of my cynicism, but nevertheless.
Yeah. It's total freedom, right? It's like
Oh,
we talk
yeah.
about the hack, like that's the hack. And to your family member or whoever it is that we all know that person that's like, I don't care, I don't give a shit. That's like, I told a client of mine who was projecting that on one of our calls. I'm like, I think you give all the Fs. You give so many Fs
Oh,
about what
yeah.
they think. And he said, you're right.
Yeah.
They've been hurt, and it's been a persona facade that they created to protect themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
I think something else that we can offer those people out, there's so many different ways people show up and we get triggered or we witness is just, I was thinking about the people that you used to hang out with, because I have that. I've walked away from many, 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 many friendships, and especially the last 2 years when I stopped drinking. I have so much compassion for who I was at the time that I was in a circle of influence like that. And that's where they're at. And I don't need to judge them or to shame them because I was there too. And it
Mm-hmm.
served me in a way of we hopefully outgrow circles. Hopefully we outgrow family. Hopefully we outgrow ourselves
Yeah.
as we're on this quest for more, for feeling more, for being more, for doing more. Not from the place of lack that we don't feel worthy enough, but because we're ready for more and we're excited about it. But just the compassion of where they're at and what their journey is. And like you said, if they need help, we do show up. But sometimes it's like, oh, like be mindful of protecting your space, but also like, shit, I was there too. And it wasn't that long ago.
You just reminded me of a great analogy. I should use this for if I'm ever teaching on this, because you're right. We do graduate from circles of friends. That doesn't mean that there's others that if they look and they, hey, because the drinking one is a big one.
Yeah.
I remember whenever I stopped drinking about 6 years ago, I grew up in a big family of drinkers, and it's not for scruple's sake. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If somebody comes to dinner with me and they order a cocktail, go for it. And as a matter of fact, if that's what you want to do, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I'm more concerned with my not drinking making you uncomfortable than you drinking. So don't worry about me. But it's one of those, and I've had this conversation with so many people on this podcast about when you draw that line in the sand of I don't drink. First of all, there's a comedian, I think it's hilarious, that mentioned this, like, not drinking is the only thing, it's the only poison that you leave out of your body that people then ask you, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
What's it's crazy. It's such an oxymoron. But I'm reminded this episode of Seinfeld where all of a sudden they end up in the Bizarro world, and Elaine starts going with the Bizarro Seinfeld clan, which is basically Kramer's this nice, sophisticated guy. Everybody's kind and nice, and they read books, contrary to the normal Seinfeld gang that's just, who they are. And George looks at Elaine because she's going to go hang out with him. And he's like, Elaine, please take me with you. Like, basically, take me to the new, the Bizarro Jerry world. And she's like, George, I wish I could, but I can't. But that's kind of an illustration of how it is when we decide to again, it's not to say I'm better, so therefore, sorry, all of you unwashed friends that I once had, I can no longer be with you. That's not what it is at all.
Mm.
Instead, it's just you will naturally gravitate towards people that are doing things, interested in things. Like before we came on, you mentioned James Nestor's book
Mm.
about breath work and everything. I like hanging out with people that understand what the hell that is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I don't like the people that are obsessed with fantasy football and all that
Mm.
stuff. I have some of those, and I'm friends. But I wanna be able to sit down and have a conversation like what we're
Yeah.
having, and not because I'm better, but that's just where my interests have
Yeah.
graduated to, about healthy living, about understanding bigger topics and taking them apart and more intellectual pursuits, and so it's really bizarre how whenever you make that transition, you do leave some people behind, you really do, and it's not purposeful. It's just well, sometimes it is, of course, but a lot of times it's just, well, your interests have changed, and
Yeah.
I like that what you said, you've graduated, you know,
Yeah.
in that Seinfeld episode, Elaine was trying to graduate
Yeah.
to a better Seinfeld crew,
Yeah.
and so I think there's a lot in what you said, and don't you think that sometimes like, so before you and I got on, I was on a Christian men's group with, some guys that I every Wednesday I meet with, and it just formed all of them because of this podcast.
Mm.
I'd met the guy who put it together. He's an author and then Joel Green, brilliant guy that I had met and we become good friends that he put this group together. It's just 4 of us. And so by pursuing stuff like this,
Yeah.
it just it kinda like you said, the yoga mat
Yeah.
found you.
Yeah.
The people will
Yeah.
find you
100%.
when you decide to up your
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. It's a frequency. It's impossible for it to not. Like, you will change your frequency of who you want to be around with, and you will call in the people that will guide you on the path. Whether it's friends or mentors or new business partnerships. We talked about that earlier too. It's blown my mind that when I'd made decisions that seemed hard to do better for me because I needed to, for example, the ending of the drinking, that as those people fell away, I was hurt a little bit. Like, what happened? What did I do? And then back, old program victim. What did I do? Why is this happening? They hurt me. And then to witness and realize all of the new people that showed up with a different level of contribution in my life. I'll give you one example that is perfect for this. I realized when I stopped drinking that I am socially awkward in group settings in large rooms because I used to just have my cocktail and I could just float around and be friends with everybody and also need everybody to like me, which I've also graduated from that too. I like me now, so if you like me, that's awesome, and I like you too, Jason. So I think you're pretty
Yeah.
fantastic. So I'm at this event and they tell us you go mingle and network. And immediately I was like, where do I put my hands? And I need my phone. I need to like pretend I'm busy. I mean, it was
Yeah.
awkward. And I didn't know how to show up. And I had thought on the trip there, the traveling in, I'm going to meet somebody that's going to change my life. I'm going to meet someone that's going to help change my business. Like, I just need that one person that's either going to put me on a panel or on a stage or like that one person. And that day, as I'm awkwardly trying to meet people and do what we're instructed to do, I had journaled that evening about why am I so awkward? Witnessing it was because I don't drink. That was my vice. That created a persona that was larger than life. And I witnessed that when we moved when I was little. I was 9. We moved from our homes, my home life, my school, my friends, my sports, to from Boston to Maryland, and had no friends and had to learn at 9, which you're not taught how to make friends at 9. You do as littles, but like 9 was weird. Same thing happened with my brother. So I witnessed like, oh, there's a little bit of a trauma here of me not having friends and being new and not, there was just a lot of weird stuff going on in the house at that time too. So I was able to in real time heal that. And I also witnessed like, oh my gosh, I came here needy. I came here as the Oliver Twist, fill me up, fill up my cup, give me something that I don't have. I wasn't looking to offer or to give. I was looking to take. I wanted something to take from there. And somehow, do you think in that frequency of fill me up, give me something was gonna allow the right person that would be interested in doing business with me? No, they were probably like, ew, your energy sucks. Like, you need
Mhm.
something. Go do your yoga and meditation. And quickly, I was a part of this group for a year. The next event on that flight in, I remember being like, I am going to blow this room away with my love, with my connection, with my acts of service and my acts of kindness. And I am going to pour into every single person I can. And I did. I mean, I was either helping network or exchange a number or give a book, or I was praying over people. Like, I don't do this in business normally. Who would ever? Because somebody spoke and they were really rocked to something. I think that their husband had a brain tumor. And I'm like, hey, I want to just pray with you about your husband. And that was happening. What a different experience. And going forward, never ever will I show up to a room with an empty vessel. I'm here to serve and give, and I know better. But the more people and more things in the last 2 years from that experience have shown up to pour back into me, right? Like that's
Yep.
what it's about. But when we are
Yep.
unhealed and we're still deeply wounded, we're doing this and expecting somebody to pour in. And maybe somebody will out of like mercy and kindness. But if we want to be on the frequency of helping build each other up and helping to contribute for the greater good, we need to do our work and stop being so greedy with this give me, feed me.
100%. If your strategy is waiting for your ship to come in, you're gonna be sitting at
A
an empty
long
dock
time.
for a long
I can
time. It's just
attest.
and yeah, and and that's the thing. Golly, you hit on something there. I used to think because I was this sharp, smart, somebody's gonna notice Jason
Mm,
Wright, and they're gonna say, "Wow, you're amazing. Come with me, young man.
sign
Let me
here.
sign here. Let me just let me give you riches because you are just awesome."
Yeah.
I lived like that forever, and it's when you realize that,
Uh,
yeah, no, the world's too busy doing its own thing, and
Yeah.
if you will just start to focus on giving
Yeah.
what you have to give, like, and I love just as a general uh, rule for going because I hate social settings. I cannot stand going to those networking events and stuff like that. I hate them. I hate going to weddings. I can't stand chit chat and small talk, which is kind of weird that I'm an interviewer on the podcast. But but this is deliberate. Just going to me, I always tell people like going to a cocktail party or something like that. It's like monkeys just going. Wah, 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 wah. I can't stand. It's just the same chit chat. Can't stand it.
Yeah.
All right, I digress. But if I go with the attitude, I'm going to make sure every single person that I talk to, I know way more about them than they ever know about me. I'm going to ask them questions. My job is to learn from them and learn about them. So I give myself that mission and that goal.
Yeah.
Game changer.
Yeah.
Total game changer. And then also just kind of a random quick little strategy. Jerry Seinfeld, going back to Seinfeld, he said he's like that. He hates interacting like this, but what he does is he asks closed-end questions. Where are you from? Do you have kids? Or are you married? Do you have kids? How many do you have? He said, if you will just come up with a set, you'll learn about the person, and two, there's an answer. It doesn't lead to this big, long, drawn out thing, or they just don't know what to say. And so having those tactics to give, I want to learn about you. Oh, tell me about you. Yeah, we'll get to me in a minute if that's what you really want to know. I hate to talk about me, but tell me about you. And I want to learn, how can I help you?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I love about my podcast. People are sometimes shocked, and you may find this, is that when I have people on, what I'll start trying to do is connect them all over with all these people I know all over the world. Say,
Yeah.
hey, you need to talk to this person. It's, to me, that's just so much more
Yeah.
fulfilling than having somebody on this show, then calculating like I probably would 20 years ago. Okay, now how can they help me?
Yeah.
Who can I ask them if they know, oh my gosh, look at their LinkedIn. They know this person.
Get an
Now
introduction.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, now it's the opposite. I'm like, hey, you need to talk to this person I had on my show way back when.
Yeah.
You guys need to connect. And that has led to, well, a company I co-founded last year. That's exactly how it happened. I was
Amazing.
connecting these people. And boom, we started a business together that was never the goal.
Yeah.
And so I think what you just said, absolutely 100%.
Awesome. Yeah. It's where it's at.
It is. Jennifer, this has been an absolute blast. Now, before you go, because we just kind of, we dove in.
Yeah.
I hope this is the best podcast interview you've ever done because we
Yeah.
covered some
You
ground.
did. Thank you.
What I want to do is I want you to give your elevator pitch, just kind of sum up who you are, and then most importantly, where people can find you and know more about you, follow what you're doing, and anything else that we didn't cover. Like I told you before we got on the show, if there's anything we didn't cover that this audience needs to learn from you or about you, by all means, have at it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And this has been Phenomenal. You're the best. I'm so excited to have this time
Thanks.
with you. So what I do today, between yoga and Ayurveda and group coaching, I create a container to help people reclaim the self-worth. And sometimes we don't have quite that language, but when life becomes a little bit not where we're stuck, where we're not finding the purpose and meaning, where we're just not understanding that there's more for us. I take it from what may feel like a midlife crisis. It's not a midlife crisis, but there is an opportunity for a midlife breakthrough or even a midlife awakening. And I take all of that work from everything I've discovered and everything I've worked on. It's not about listening to another podcast. Which these are great. There's foundation there, but the answer isn't in the podcast. It's in the work that you're going to do. It's not another book. I read all the books. You can see my books. Like I have been on the quest. I've done literally all the coaching. I've coached with the best coaches in the freaking world. It still took me to fall apart on a yoga mat. So there's no quick fix. And I want to offer the steps, and the way that I approach this reclamation is through compassion, through tenderness, through truth telling, and being supported. I work with women today. I've worked with men too, and I don't have a man's container today, but I work with women where we empower and support each other and mirror back to each other so we can absolutely heal at the deepest level, and then we can expand and grow together. That does look like a group coaching offer. I have it just created and just launched. It's called the Sacred Garden Collective. It's a 16-week course. I also have group retreats that we do. We just came back from Sedona. I had 16 women together, climbing the red rocks, doing yoga and meditation, and absolutely falling in love with themselves, maybe for the first time in their life. So I'm deeply passionate about giving women the tools that I didn't have and helping them expand their wings. I believe that sometimes we clipped our own wings and we get to put them back on and let them expand ourselves. So you can find me on Instagram at jksyoga_coaching. I'm at jksyoga.com is my website. Also on Facebook. My full name is Jennifer Kenny-Smith. It's on LinkedIn. And so I'd love if you're interested in learning more, just reach out. I am the one who responds on the messages, so it is me. We can do a discovery call, or if there's anything that any of your students I call, your clients, your listeners need, feel free to reach out. I'm here to support and guide those who need it the most.
Fantastic. Well, Jennifer, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Don't let this be your last time to come back. I'd love to have you back on in the
Thank you.
future. And Godspeed. This was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So grateful to be here.
Thanks.
The content provided in this podcast, The Healthy CEO, is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Healthy CEO. Any information provided by our hosts or guests, including any physicians who may appear on the podcast, is solely for informational purposes and does not create any doctor-patient relationship. Listeners are advised to consult with their healthcare providers before making any changes to their health routines. The Healthy CEO and its affiliates assume no responsibility or liability for any consequence resulting directly or indirectly from any action or inaction you take based on the information provided in this podcast.